At 6:02, I call the regular city council meeting and public hearing of the governing body of the city of Blanco to order. Roll call.
Mayor Martin.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Castrena. Councilmember McClellan.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Present.
Councilmember Barron. Present. Councilmember Devine.
Thank you. Please stand for the pledge. Thank you. We're going to move on to announcements. We just have a few today. The first is that the Lights Out Texas is going on through June 15th. And this is to help protect the billions of migratory birds that fly over Texas annually. And I encourage citizens to turn off all non-essential outdoor lighting from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. The second is there will be a lunar eclipse this Sunday evening, so check it out. It's supposed to be early, so you don't even have to set your alarm to wake up. Real Ale Brewing Company will have their 26th anniversary party on May 21st from 12 to 6. And the Texas Hotel and Lodging Association will be hosting a hotel occupancy tax training this week, Thursday on May 12th at 2 p.m. And that will be taking place at the Old Blanco County Courthouse. And finally, I would like to thank Mayor Pro Tem Martin Sauceda for his outstanding contribution and dedication to the city for the past 13 years while serving on city council. We have a small gift for you as a thank you for all these years of service. And we also have a certificate for him. And I just wanted to read a little part of the certificate. It says, Martin Sauceda's dedication to the city of Blanco through his personal contributions, including his service as a council member for more than 12 years and as Mayor Pro Tem, has greatly benefited the city of Blanco and improved our quality of life. Thank you again, Mayor Pro Tem. That being said, we are going to move on to public comments. Thank you. First, we have Mr. Wayne Gosnell.
Thank you, Council. I'm making these comments on short-term rentals because I can't wait until the subject comes up after a while, because after my presentation, I've got to go home and take care of Dad. So just briefly, if you recall back, we had the Visionaries and Preservation Program that was started in 2007, and that morphed into the Blanco Historic Preservation Action Plan and the Comprehensive Master Plan. And the number one thing that the citizens of Blanco wanted to preserve about Blanco was our small town feel. The number two things was night sky. We'll get to that in a little bit. The mayors and the council members that we've had for the past 20 years, and you can verify this, have acknowledged that growth is coming. And they said something like, well, we can't stop the growth, but we can do something to manage it so that Blanco doesn't lose our small town feel. It's been consistent. Well, good intentions require actions. And to bring those good intentions to fruition, we need to do something. We can't be asleep at the wheel. If we're asleep at the wheel, we're going to get whatever comes down the pike. So one way that the city can shape its future in the face of unprecedented growth is through ordinances. And that's what you're going to be talking about after a while. The issue is, are we serious about this or not? Do we care if our town morphs into something that we can't even recognize, or do we? That's the essence of what we're talking about tonight. The short-term rental ordinance is a way to get a handle on the trend that's causing havoc in many other cities. I've been told that Fredericksburg, on the weekends, there's a lot of districts close to the downtown area that they're abandoned on the weeks, and on the weekends they're full of tourists because they've all been converted to short-term rentals. I have friends of mine who have short-term rentals over there. The people who have been living in those units have been displaced, and that's the way it is. Now in Blanco, we have a shortage, as everyone knows, of affordable housing, as we do. We don't have enough people for enough short-term rentals. I'm sorry, affordable housing for our people to live. These are the people that work in our shops, that are waitresses, that change our oil. Where are they going to live if we don't have affordable housing for them? So my point is, we can debate the details of a short-term rental ordinance. We can get into, and we have to get into, we've got to get it right. And we can debate what is fair, what is equitable, and what is legally defensible, because there's a lot of legal questions that we're talking about here. But without a short-term rental ordinance, Blanco may quickly develop into a place that none of us will recognize. Now, I know that there are calls to delay passage of that ordinance for exactly those reasons, just until it can be thoroughly vetted. I have no problem with that. But if council does take that approach, I would like to ask council to consider putting a moratorium on new short-term rentals until an ordinance can be passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it just me, or is that mic not working properly? Maybe it's just me.
Sybil Jones, I believe you signed up on the wrong sheet, but I see that you're talking about 42 on 32. So yeah, right now is the perfect time for you.
Okay, good. So I just wanted to come and introduce myself. Do what? Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. So I wanted to introduce myself. I'm the business manager for Lindemann Lane Enterprises and Dorosic Enterprises, which also has 42 on 32 RV Park. I wanted to introduce myself to y'all and to kind of explain a little bit about the park and about our water usage. I understand that water is a very valuable resource, and we take that very seriously at the park. We use the water for our people that are camping in the RV park. We have 114 sites, which y'all are aware of. Excuse me, everyone in RVs utilizes the water very, very wisely, and we do site checks to check, the water nozzles and everything daily, so that we make sure everyone's using the water as they should be. We don't allow washing of vehicles. We don't allow water waste. And we're going to have the swimming pool, splash pad, and swimming pools and splash pad and amenity center open soon. And we're going to invite the community of Blanco out for a community day. That'll be coming in the announcements. You'll be the first ones to be able to utilize it. And I just want to kind of preface that we are not using any of the city's water in the pools, in the splash pad. All of that is trucked in by the owner himself. So I just hope that y'all consider. We think that the park's a very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's valuable to the city in that we bring additional revenue, our campers bring additional revenue to the city. I actually manage 4 short-term rentals there, and they come to see Blanco and to see the area. And we've got a lot of tourists coming in. Probably, every weekend, every other weekend. There's a lot of tourists coming from the Houston area. I have a lot coming from the Dallas area. They love Blanco as we do, and we just want to protect it as much as we can. So I thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Trucking supplier, bringing water in
Yes.
for the flash and water meters and everything.
Uh-huh.
You know where he obtained the water?
I obtained the a permit from the Canyon Lake Water Supply down the road in Bulverde. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wayne Dworsek. Okay. We are going to move on to proclamation. Oh. Wayne? Okay, that's what I thought. So we are moving on to proclamations, and there are 2 today. We will be going to the public hearing in a bit. So that was just public comments. It's different than public hearing. The public hearing will come later in our meeting, and we will all have a chance to sign up. We'll have a chance to talk. Don't worry. There's 2 sheets. There's one for public comments and one for the public hearing. So for the public comments, during the public hearing, you will have an opportunity to make public comments regarding the STR, which is all of what I'm reading the subject is. So I apologize for the confusion, but the public comments for the public hearing will be during the public hearing. So we are moving on to the proclamations. And the first one we have is the Older Americans Month Proclamation. Whereas the City of Blanco is home to citizens aged 60 years and old or older whose experiences and wisdom connect us to the past and helps us meet the challenges of the future. And whereas the older citizens of the City of Blanco are representative of the unprecedented trend in the nation's demographic makeup, and whereas older persons are diverse, respected citizens who continue to contribute to our nation's social and economic well-being as they live longer, healthier, and more productive lives, many even starting second careers, and whereas America grows older, each community must strive to understand and address the evolving challenges and needs for our older citizens and the people who care for them. And whereas the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead require us to think differently about health and long-term care and work together to ensure that older Americans can age strong, last long, and with dignity. And whereas the City of Blanco wishes to join in the celebration to honor the seniors of Blanco County and to encourage them to age strong, live long. Now, therefore, I, Rachel Lumpy, Mayor of the City of Blanco, do hereby proclaim the month of May as Older Americans Month. Flag Day and Week Proclamation. Whereas the Second Continental Congress adopted the American flag on June 14th, 1777, and whereas June 14th, 2022 marks 245 years of displaying our American flag, and whereas it is fitting and proper to officially recognize Old Glory as a symbol of hope, inspiration, and pride for the people of the United States and around the world, and whereas in order to commemorate the adoption of our flag on August 3rd, 1949, the Congress, by joint resolution, designated June 14th of each year as Flag Day and requested that the President issue an annual proclamation designating the week in which June 14th occurs as National Flag Week and call upon citizens of the United States to display the flag during that week. And now, therefore, I, Rachel Lumpy, by the power vested in me as mayor of the city of Blanco and on behalf of the city council and the citizens of Blanco, do hereby proclaim the week of June 12th through the 18th as National Flag Week. We are going to move on to presentations, and our first presentation is by the Blanco County Friends of the Night Sky, Mr. Wayne Gosnell.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I will be brief. We talked about the Visionaries and Preservation Program, the Historic Preservation Program, and the Comprehensive Master Plan, all of which said we want to keep our small town and, as a part of that, want to keep our night skies. Well, I'm here tonight to talk about the night skies. A whole bunch of people were involved with all of that. Several of us took on the night skies. And at some point during that process, we decided that Blanco needed to qualify to be an international dark sky community designated by the International Dark Sky Association in Tucson, Arizona, which is a world organization that tries to preserve the night sky worldwide. To be a international dark sky community, we had to be a municipality. Okay, we got that one, check. Then we had to have a way of measuring the darkness of the night sky. And we got a meter, and we started in 2007 taking night sky measurements at 14 locations in and around Blanco. The hardest thing we had to do was develop a quality and acceptable outdoor lighting ordinance. Oh my goodness, that took us years, literally. Could not have done it without the council, could not have done it without our legal counsel, but we finally did it, and it was acceptable to the International Dark Sky Association. We had to have an active program of public education to educate people about the need to preserve the night sky and to fight light pollution and sky glow. We had to have an active program of public education, primarily in the schools, but also in the public at large. We had to show evidence of a broad citizen support for the night sky, not just a couple of us, yelling in the night, but broad citizen support. And finally, we had to show actual success in light pollution control. We started in 2007, took us 15 years, but on April 26, 2022, we got the designation. It took a full community effort of which we can all be proud. So my basic purpose in stating all this right now is to thank you, the city council, thank you, the mayor, and past city councils and past mayors, because we've had tremendous support. Also want to thank the Blanco Chamber of Commerce that was partnered with us the whole way, and in fact was one of the signatories for the original application. I need to thank the Hill Country Alliance that we've worked hand in glove with them, and finally the International Dark Sky Association of Texas. I've included in your packet the article that was published this week in the Blanco County News. I know you've probably already seen that. I included it so that it becomes a part of the public record and a part of the permanent record, because it effectively captures what we're talking about. That article or something similar to it has been published by the San Antonio Express News, KSAT in San Antonio, probably other outlets that we just haven't been notified of. It is a big deal because Blanco is now one of only 37 communities worldwide that has attained this designation. Of those 37, 6 of them are right here in Texas, and 5 of those are right here in the Texas Hill Country. Those are Wimberley, Horseshoe Bay, Dripping Springs, Fredericksburg, and then the other one is Lakewood Village, a little place up on the lake north of Dallas somewhere. I don't know how they got it. But here in the Hill Country, it's a movement. We also have the Dark Sky Parks. Enchanted Rock got that designation. The Rimmers Ranch down near Bandera has it, and finally the LBJ National Historic Park, the ranch unit of that, and we're working with the Johnson City unit to try to get that. IDSC, the designation can be an economic boon for Blanco. This is another reason why those 4 million people that live in metropolitan areas close to us have to come to Blanco to see our hills, jump in a river, and now to see our night skies. We're working with the Chamber of Commerce to see how we can leverage that designation for the economic well-being of the community. We have gateway signs that over there, the council has already seen that. The council has approved the design of that gateway sign. We're waiting on TxDOT to give us the specifications. Mr. Esco is trying as hard as he can to get an answer out of TxDOT, and you have my empathy, sir. This week, okay. Anyway, when they do that, we had a meeting with the Blanco Chamber of Commerce Board. The Commerce Board approved using hot money, hotel occupancy tax money, up to $1,500 to buy 5 of these signs and erect them wherever and on whatever size the city decides. But we'll do the sign. If we have to change the design of the sign because TxDOT requires a different aspect ratio, we can do that. Larry Seiler does it. He's brilliant at that kind of stuff. Heads and beds, that's what the hot money is all about, and that's what this designation is all about. Okay, now we got it. We got the designation. Good, great. Now we got to keep it. It's not a permanent thing. Every year we have to give a report to the International Dark Sky Association. And basically what we have to do is give them evidence that we are in fact maintaining momentum for night sky preservation and light pollution abatement. And so we will continue to work with the city administration and to work with the chamber. The Chamber's Night Sky Friendly Business Recognition Program is going great guns. We have over 30 businesses in Blanco that have been recognized for their outstanding outdoor lighting. Sandy Schweitzer heads that group, and there's several more in the offing. We're working with the city. Our approach with the city is education first and then enforcement. The last thing we want to do is whack people upside the head with an ordinance. We want to educate people to show them why we need to get those lights pointed down and then help them come up with ways to do that. I also included in your packet to that regard a quick guide to Blanco's 2018 outdoor lighting ordinance. We did this right after the ordinance was passed and gave it to the city in 2019. It's been used sporadically. Basically, the ordinance is long and it's a pain to read a city ordinance. It's a pain to write a city ordinance. People don't have time to read it. This is a 2-page thing that gives you just the bare minimum. And basically it's keep the lights down and get them 3,000 Kelvin or below. So I urge the city to continue to use that. If we give that thing out to every building permit, it's going to help greatly. This is not rocket science, and I'm almost finished. Later this summer, we will do an outdoor lighting inventory of Blanco. We did a comprehensive citywide inventory in 2014. I wonder what's changed. Not much. Some, but not much. So we're going to do that again. We will do the historic district first. Then we will do the Blanco ISD, the Independent School District. I talked with Clay Rosenbaum last week. He says, great, come on, we'll take it. Very, very cooperative. Then we'll do the rest of Blanco. We'll prioritize our efforts. Then we will work on education and work with the city on doing that. Our next major project is working with Johnson City to try to get them to also seek International Dark Skies community status, and we'll work on that. So in conclusion, I'd like to thank the council once again for your past and your future support of the night sky. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. And I just want to say that while Mr. Gosnell is always very humble and very kind and gives lots of credit to lots of people who were involved in this, he has been the driving force in this project forever. And without his consistent work toward the end, we never would have gotten here. So thank you, Wayne.
We're going to move on to our next presentation, which is more of an announcement than a presentation at this point, but the high school scholarship presentation. So the city council has decided that we are all going to be donating our May stipends towards a scholarship for one of the high school seniors. The total will be $600, and our plan is to have the top 15% students in just a drawing at random. So there is no essay contest or anything like that. We're just picking at random. I'm still finalizing it with the school board, but I just wanted to announce that we will be doing a city council scholarship this year. We are going to move on to staff presentations. And first we have City Hall, Mr. Escovy.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and residents of Blanco. Thank you very much. Next slide. So one thing I didn't do is I didn't introduce the finance director or interim finance director that we've had for a couple of months. She's done a fantastic job working with us, and she's going to be with us a few more weeks. Her name is Rosie Vela, and I'll have her stand up in a minute. I'm not going to make her talk tonight, but she has over 30 years of experience with small and large towns. And we are working towards hiring a permanent finance director. One of the things that she's helping us with and helping cross-train staff with is doing budget to actuals so that the council and eventually the public will get to see what we're spending and how much we have in reserves. And that's a goal that administration has. With her help, we also have been able to get a new auditor called Bell Harris and Pachek. And they have a ton of experience with cities and counties and school districts. So they've done a lot of work there. And hopefully this year we'll actually get you the budget early so you can really look through it line by line. But as you've noticed, this meeting and then the last meeting, we've been going backwards through the last couple of years of audits to make sure that things that weren't done correctly are getting approved by you now so that we can get a clean audit for this year. So Rosie, I'm not gonna make you talk, but you can just stand up so the council sees you. Oh, you're doing a great job. Fantastic job. And we really appreciate that. She's kind of the person behind the scenes, really working and cross-training the rest of the staff that are also really doing a good job. Next slide. So you may have noticed we did some pothole repair last week or two, but that's really just kind of the first step of what council had asked administration to do. So we started that, and Infomark did a good job. There's a couple people that were working on that for the last week or so, and then the next step in this will actually be to look at the street conditions that the CIAMAC group put together, which is the Capital Improvement Management Committee group put together, and they walked every area. And basically, if you look at that, it's hard to see, but the red is really the places that don't have any street. I mean, it's just really just dirt or gravel. But I think what the focus is going to be on the money that we have to fix this year will really be to look at the ones that are kind of an orange, and we'll put it on our website eventually so that the staff and the council and the residents can see that. But what we're really looking at doing is looking at some big fixes, and then through the years having kind of an actual plan over 4 or 5 years of how we're going to fix the street. So instead of just patching everything one year and then all of a sudden going, oh, we're going to patch it again, we're going to try to look at more substantive fixes and have a really a repair log. And that's kind of the plan on that. Next slide. The other thing is we're going to start focusing on code enforcement. I've heard from residents, I've heard from council that we haven't been doing that the last maybe several months. And that is a focus. We're looking at hiring a part-time code enforcement officer. We found a little bit of money to do that. I've always wanted to make sure that we have cash before we start on the newest endeavor, but we are going to start in the next couple of months really looking at code enforcement. I appreciate everybody's patience in this, but we will start really getting things cleaned up. And the next thing is I want to focus on quality of life ordinances. I think there's a little bit of confusion about the ordinances that we're looking at doing, things like short-term rentals, things like water quality, looking at how we have RVs, all those kind of things coming up. They're not really to clamp down on what people can do. What we're trying to look at and what council's been really working hard on doing is really kind of deciding how to help kind of shoehorn the growth and make sure that what we're doing is we're keeping the quality around so that you don't have too much of a concentration in certain areas, that you actually have, you're really looking at the aesthetics of the town, and we're keeping Blanco being pretty and doing the things we want, not trying to stop growth, but really trying to kind of help develop and nurture it. that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. The police department, Chief Rubin.
Good evening. You have the monthly report in front of you, so unless there's any questions, I won't go over those numbers. But I did want to point out, if you, on the police department's Facebook site, we've started doing weekly code information. So we're calling it In the Code. Like last week, we just kind of introduced it. This week, we have the first city ordinance. So we're trying to educate residents on what these codes are before we have to enforce those things. So second thing I want to point out is that Detective McMain was awarded a scholarship from the Hill Country Children's Advocacy Center to attend the Crimes Against Children's Conference in Dallas. So they're paying her registration and a hotel fee. So that was a good scholarship for her to get.
Okay.
Do you have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. So we are going to move on to the public hearing at this time. So at 6:33, we are in public hearings, and item 1 is approval of ordinance regulating short-term rentals and imposing a rent-related permit fee and penalties for non-compliance. So first, we have Robert Boydson.
Okay, received an email from Robert Boydston. We support passage of the short-term rental ordinance. Blanco needs to protect against too many residents' properties being held for short-term rental usages. Thank you.
Next, Brandon Carlson.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, council members. The Chamber of Commerce sent an email to all of you today, but we wanted to read it here as well. So here's what it said. To the City of Blanco City Council, the Chamber of Commerce is in agreement that our community needs registration and regulation on short-term rentals. We agree that steps need to be taken to help manage short-term rentals, but moving too quickly to get this in place without being done correctly will hurt our town more than it will help. We disagree with the way this current ordinance draft is being rushed through. We believe the public, including current owners and operators of short-term rentals, have a right to be included in meaningful deliberations on this issue and should not be excluded or dismissed. While regulation on short-term rentals should be a good thing, moving forward too quickly will have a negative effect that we believe has not been considered. For many people, short-term rentals are their business. This new ordinance is in direct conflict with many of the members of the Chamber of Commerce and members of our community. We disagree with these following fundamental points in the proposed ordinance. Y'all have a letter with you that have those points. I just don't have time to read through each one of them right now. Short-term rentals are great for our town, and tourism is vital to our economy. When people come to stay here, they're planning on spending money. They eat at our restaurants, they go to our distilleries, they shop at our stores, and visit our parks. They have less of an impact on infrastructure, water, and sewage, while still investing in Blanco. The gravity of this ordinance will have a large impact on many businesses, and rushing to pass it in its current state without more robust involvement is an unfair act. We request that you delay action to allow more in-depth conversation to do this correctly for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil Nimes.
Hello. I totally disagree with everything you just said. But as a short-term renter, I've been an RVer for 20 years, and I've rented short-term rentals all over the world. And it's been my experience that most times I bring food and everything I need, and I may go out and eat once or twice, but, and that's on like housing short-term rentals. My RVing experience has been, it's party time. And so I bring my trash, I bring my noise, I bring my drunken tomfoolery, as other RVers do too, because you're on vacation. So, you're out to have a good time. So you don't really care about conserving water or picking up your beer cans or, it's like when you go to the river, like Flat Rock, I've lived here 9 years in town. I've been in the county since 95, but, when the 2015 flood came and people discovered Flat Rock, all those people are now going to Flat Rock and they're leaving their diapers and their barbecue pits and their trash and I doubt all those groceries and diapers and trash is coming from our supermarket. Because people typically bring what they want to eat and drink with them when they go RVing or short-term rental. So I think the benefit to the city is probably marginal on short-term rentals. I think the people that benefit the most are the people that are renting the properties. And also in short-term rentals, I've seen it in Marfa, Austin, New Braunfels, like entire neighborhoods are short-term rentals. And especially in Marfa, it's a smaller town. One of my friends is a teacher there, and the schools are falling apart because all these investors are buying all the properties, making them short-term rentals so their kids don't go to school and they don't get the benefit with Robinhood of the tax revenue from that. So really the people that benefit the most from short-term rentals are the RV park owners and the people that are running the short-term rentals. So I think we really need some kind of policy. And I think in the meantime, until we can decide on one, we need a moratorium on any further short-term rentals.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say about that.
Dennis Moore?
Your Honor, councilmen and women, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. First of all, I would like to say that I hate that a person owns a piece of property that can't do what they want to with it. If you own it, I think you ought to be able to do what you want, but on the flip of that, I was asked about rezoning property next to, I own Buggy Barn Museum, 1915 Main Street. And we're trying to make that more of a tourist attraction. We're working on dressing up the front of it. I'm open to suggestions to make it more appealing to the city and visitors. But with that said, personally, I'm against rezoning that property next to me for historic building. I think it could be utilized better for some type of infrastructure that would promote tourism in the city of Blanco. But there again, on the flip of that, if I owned it, I won't be able to do what I want to with it. But I know rules are rules. There's some rules I don't like now that I still have to abide by. So now I was asking, I prefer that it not be rezoned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jet Sophia?
Hi, I'm Jet Sophia and I live in Blanco and I want to make a couple comments about short-term rentals. Is Wayne still here? When I first started coming here in 2004, I could not see the Milky Way. I was, in the state park, never saw the Milky Way. Now I see it all the time. So thanks whoever worked on the sky, the dark sky. And Blanco wasn't much of a tourist town then either. At the state park, in order to encourage people to come and camp, if you stayed 3 nights, you only had to pay for 2. They don't do that anymore. But I don't want to turn back the clock, but neither do I want Blanco to move any further in the direction of Fredericksburg. I am passionate, I guess, about short-term rental ordinance and am in favor of it. It's been said that businesses in Blanco need workers and workers need a place to live. And they're not going to live in some place only for the weekend. They're going to have to live here all the time. And there's not a lot of rentals in Blanco. More and more houses come up for sale and they get snatched up and they are turned into weekend establishments. The other thing that I would like to say is I live in Blanco and I want to live in a neighborhood. And in order to live in a neighborhood, I need neighbors. And I don't want to live in an area where I live there full time and then there's empty houses all around me where people come for the weekend. And who are those people who come for the weekend? Families, maybe rowdy people. He left, but he talked about beer cans, I've seen beer cans. So, the other thing that I want to say is, I think that there's some people who own short-term rentals in Blanco who do not reside in Blanco. And that doesn't make sense to me. If the owners don't reside in Blanco, and if the tourists don't reside in Blanco, who is there to give a hoot about Blanco and the effects that their behavior, their ownership, et cetera, has on the quality of life in Blanco? So I wouldn't be opposed to absentee owners being charged an extra fee. I don't know if you can do that, but it's just, I think that the quality of life, the family life in Blanco, the quality of civic engagement in Blanco, none of that is enhanced by empty dwellings. And so I'm very in favor of short-term rental. And I agree if there's not an agreement to do it now, that there should be a moratorium on short-term rental. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, Stone.
I own a short-term rental here in Blanco. The people that come and stay at my bed and breakfast reasonably well, they've never broke anything. Well, for instance, my last renters were married at the courthouse. My renters eat pizza from the pizza place. I don't believe that everyone brings all the food that they have, that they need. I see them walking the streets, enjoying Blanco. Also, we're not paying for their kids to go to school. We're not paying for the police to police them. I feel that if you make it that we can't have these short-term rentals, then I'm paying taxes for a house that I'm not getting any benefits from whatsoever, and it would probably be better for me to bulldoze the house. That's not a nice thing to say, but it would make my taxes a lot cheaper. And if I rented the house, I would rent a house to a family of 4 that would have 2 kids going to school, and that would be more expense for us here. So having these short-term rentals is, for me, it's wonderful. It's a little bit of income. It's a business for me. And I'd feel very upset if I was not to be able to rent my house for 3 and 4 days at a time. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Varello.
So first of all, I wanted to thank you for all your work on the short-term rental ordinance. I've had the opportunity to read the draft on the website, and I appreciate that both the business owners, but also the neighbors of the short-term rentals are being considered in your ordinance. As with all compromises, people will not be completely satisfied, but I appreciate you working on an ordinance for the good of the city and all of its residents. So thank you.
Thank you. Amy Arnold.
I wanted to speak to you today as a short-term renter. I have 3 units. I also have 2 long-term rentals, and I run 2 businesses here in Blanco, in the city of Blanco. And I might have been the one that got this all started, as I had some concerns that some of us were paying for our hot taxes and others were not. And so I had asked the city secretary to look into that because I was a little bit afraid that I felt like I was the only one paying the tax on time. And so I appreciate that you guys have taken time to look into this, and I agree that we do need some kind of an ordinance, some way to track all of the short-term rentals, and to keep up with them, to know who's running which ones and how they're being run. But a lot of the stuff in this ordinance, I have a lot of issues with, that I feel like they're coming across as the short-term rentals, as you've heard some people here today, feel like it's just a bunch of tourists who come in here, do their own thing. My experience has been the complete opposite. All of my guests, they sign the guest book, they list all the places that they have visited. Just this weekend in all three of my units, I think between those three units, they covered every business in Blanco. Some of them multiple, they spent a lot of time at the state park. They eat in our restaurants, so they're paying sales tax that comes back to you guys as well that way, in addition to the hot tax revenue. A lot of these ordinances, I feel like, are already addressed in other areas that were already subjected to the noise ordinance. That's for all residents, not just needing to be something specific for short-term renters. And I noticed in the most recent draft that I just happened to pull up, that's just a week, I guess, later than the one that you guys published. Something else has been added in here in reference to losing your permit if it's not continuously being rented for 9 months. And there's lots of examples of why that would occur. My most recent older lady that I rented my short-term rental to, she checked in August because she was building a house in Rocking J and it wasn't done yet. And she needed a place to live. There was nowhere to go. So I let her stay in my short-term rental. She was there a little over 9.5 months. It took them that long to get her house done. And in that amount of time, I would have lost my permit because I would not have been paying tax on that because it's outside of the 30-day limit. So there's examples like that, or when we take our short-term rental off of a platform so that we can do repairs, something like that. We've done something like that in the past at another one of my units. You take it off the market so you can make improvements. Usually during the not busy season, but in the winter season, we take it off, do major improvements, and sometimes that could take 9 months if you're doing something to it. And so I would think that's a little bit one of the issues that I see on here that could cause. It's one of those things where I feel like you're being really detailed about, where there's other areas where it says you can't impact another residence within 1,000 yards, negatively impact. And I would like to know who's going to define having a negative impact. So I feel like if you guys could pause this and work out some of those details, I think that would work better for everyone as a whole.
Thank you. Pam, neighbors?
Yes, I'm Pam Neighbors, and I do also have 2 short-term rentals here in Blanco, and I'm also concerned about this ordinance. I appreciate the work on it and realize we do need some ordinance and regulations on things, but why cause problems when there's not problems here? And some of this is stereotyped against these short-term rentals when the problems are not really here. Maybe there have been issues with rentals and not necessarily short-term rentals, because my experience with these short-term rentals, I've had the most wonderful guests. I've met some of the nicest people that are bringing revenue to the city of Blanco, whether it's eating, whether it's visiting their relatives and having weddings at the courthouse. I have one guest that is meeting for the very first time, his biological father and his real sister here in Blanco. And they're spending money, and as they're doing this here in Blanco. I mean, there are all kinds of different scenarios. I mean, yeah, they might go travel out of Blanco one day to do the wine tour or whatever, but a lot of it is here in Blanco, whether it's at Twin Sisters or whatever. So they are spending time here in Blanco, whether they're staying a weekend or a week at a time, or 2 or 3 weeks, which has happened. I know there was a movie shot here in Blanco, and they spent money, as they're staying at these bed and breakfasts, and we treat them with respect, and they treat us with respect. I haven't had any problems, no trash, nothing whatsoever. And they keep it as clean as they can. They're very respectful. They follow the Airbnb codes. Ours are not handicapped Airbnbs, and so there's not handicap regulations within. And they're stated on there. And so anybody with handicaps are not renting them as handicaps. So, when you're putting codes on there for Airbnbs, they're not there, so, and when you're trying to put those on the handicaps, there's not handicap issues, even handicaps things around town, for regulations too. So, with that being said, and like I said, I haven't had any problem with the food or anything else, as far as food service and fire safety or anything, because that's all provided within the Airbnb regulations too. Anyway, I don't have problems with my Airbnb, and I don't have any non-compliance with my guests. And so it's all on the up and up. It's a good thing. It's a good thing for Blanco and for the guests that are here. It's bringing revenue to our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonnie Trish.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Trish, and I've had a short-term rental now for a while, and I live there also. I have a little over 3 acres. So with the ordinances that I've been reading through and everything, it's really, I agree with the other man that stood up earlier that I believe that this needs to be addressed farther. That because there's so much that was listed on there that if you don't know how even Airbnb or VRBO, their rules are even to be listed with them, that if you don't know, you're writing stuff in there because of the handicap for one thing. If we are listed in there and we say that, they're asking us, no, we have no handicap. Those guests that are looking through there, they're going to be looking, they're not going to come to one that's not handicapped. I mean, what do y'all do around the square? There's stuff there at the square that's not legal handicap. So that's what I'm saying. How do you do that? How can you put this in an ordinance for us to follow? When another thing I have to address, I've owned my property for 31 years. And I have not still gotten city sewer. 31 years. But then you want me to go by this ordinance on doing this. I mean, I think that, yes, I don't want Blanco to blow up and do this, but what's being said about the short-term rentals, that is stereotyped. They're being stereotyped. That is not what we have here in this town. We have people coming and staying with us that are coming to see their families, their mom that might have a little bitty 1-bedroom house here, but we're bringing their families in so she could come to our home and visit with their families. That's what I'm saying. You really need to look into this more before deciding on all of this and getting the facts straight on all of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa Siddle.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Seidel. I born and raised here in Blanco, and I have a short-term rental property. I think y'all need to look more at this because some of the rules that y'all are trying to throw on us and some of the things that you're stating that we're doing wrong. Mine is listed through Airbnb. There is strict rules that we have to follow. The guests that stay in our house fills out a survey after they leave our house. We fill out a survey on our guest. And if you're doing something wrong, you're penalized. And if the guests are doing something wrong, they're penalized where they can no longer rent off of the Airbnb site. So we are following rules and stuff. I think y'all need to look at this a lot better and understand all the rules that we do follow. And like Bonnie said, a lot of people that come and stay, I had a family come and stay at Christmas time because they want to visit their families. There is no place to stay. I personally, when I travel, I'd rather stay in an Airbnb place than in a hotel. it's just much better. You can go shopping, you can cook your meals and everything and enjoy each other's time. We're in a hotel or motel, you're in a bedroom and it's hard to enjoy family in a small bedroom. As I think y'all really need to step back, take a look at it and have more discussions before y'all make a decision.
Thank you. So item 2 was the 1917 Main Street special use permit and rezoning from R5 to C1. And I believe Mr. Moore made his comment on that.
Didn't put it on there, but can you allow Mr. Larry Brewer to have a couple words on item 2?
Yes.
Thank you for hearing me. For 21 years, I've owned a property on 1917 Main. I purchased it from a man named Floyd Reynolds as an RV park. For the last 21 years, I have been paying, according to my Blanco County tax appraiser, I've been paying for commercial property as being taxed as commercial. I've had business here in Blanco. I own the car wash there on the corner right across from the PEC office. Bought it from Danny Keeling in 2001. And so my thing is that for 21 years, I've been trying to develop in something that I felt like that Blanco needed. And so what I did is a couple of years ago, I went back and I went and spent about $30,000 on renovating the house there that was used for a washroom for customers at the RV park. And so what happened is after I renovated the building, I went down to the city and asked them about, opening back up as an RV park. And they basically told me that they didn't want another RV park in Blanco. So I didn't do anything other than just absorb the cost of renovating the place there. And so probably about over 5 years ago, myself, Dennis Moore, and Charles Waxler were approached by the city about having it re-annexed into the city. And so we were told that if we got into the city limits, that the city would provide us with the same utilities that the other citizens in Blanco had. And it's been way over 5 years, and we never have gotten wastewater. I have city water, and I have fire and rescue, I'm pretty sure, but it's never been granted that we had things. And according to the state laws, after 4.5 years, I'm supposed to be up with what the utilities are in Blanco. And I never have gotten wastewater to my facility. So that's why when I bought the property in 2001, in February, I was going to build a new car wash. And I had an engineer that spent $12,000 with a company called Neptune Wilkinson out of Austin. And Joel made a site development plan for me. I owned the property over in Dripping Springs and had a nice 3.5 acre property over there and built a car wash on it. I was coming to Blanco. I bought the car wash over here in Blanco. I wanted to put in a car wash over here. It was better than what I had. I was going to pay some $50,000 to actually do a pressure dose system back up south of 281 to tie it into the existing sewer line on the west side. The people that owned the property beside of Dennis Moore evidently had an argument with the city and wouldn't grant me easement to go across the city to tie it in to the wastewater on the west side of the highway. And so I met with the new city manager, which has really tried to help me out as best as he can. And the thing of it is he told me when I went in to talk to him 2 months ago that it was absolutely nothing on the record as far as storage buildings in Blanco, mini storages. And so we didn't know why it was rezoned, but it was rezoned from C1 to R5. And so I'm just asking the city, I want to build a nice heated and cooled mini storage there on the property. And I just want to get rid of the stuff. I want to build something nice that's going to represent Blanco and the citizens of Blanco. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3 is 618 Live Oak special use permit to allow multifamily in the R5 for the 1 acre site. There's no public comments on that one. And we have 4 is 1725 South Highway 281, Second Echo LLC variance for a 10-foot side building setback. And 5 is 1215 4th Street, Blanco High School, the 10 feet fence variance. So with that being said, I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:04. We are going to move on to the consent agenda, and the following items may be acted upon in one motion. Item 1, approval of minutes from the April 12th, 2022 regular city council meeting and public hearing. Item 2, approval of minutes from the April 28th, 2022 special city council meeting. 3, approval of ordinance 2022-0004 general election canvassing the returns and declaring the official results of the May 7th, 2022 general election to elect 3 city council members. Item 4, approval of budget amendment to fiscal year 2020 to 2021 total reduction in revenues to the water fund in the amount of $521,670. Item 5, approval of budget amendment to FY 2020-2021 total increase to revenues and expenditures to the water fund in the amount of $3,300,319. And item 6, approval of budget amendment to FY 2020-2021 reduction in taxes for the general fund in the amount of $454,402. Increase the taxes for the debt service fund in the amount of $454,402. Is there a motion?
Mayor, if I can, I apologize. Items 4, 5, and 6, the information that you were provided from the memo from our interim finance director is correct. It is the 21-22 year, and what is actually on what you actually read from was incorrect. So it's not 2021, it is 21-22 year. I apologize for that. So if you need
And
to
that's
take
on all 3 of those items?
all 3 of them, if you have specific questions, Rosie Vela can explain that. Thank you, ma'am.
We can remove those if you would like to discuss them from. Yes.
Mike Bedperson, in the minutes from, I lost my page. In the minutes from April 12th, I would just like the record to reflect that 3 of the people who spoke, Linda Sullivan, Joe Sullivan and Mike Arnold are not residents at the addresses that are listed there. They're owners of the short-term rentals, but they are not residents. So if we could change those words to owners. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion for the consent agenda to be approved on all 6 items with the following changes. On the approval of the April the 12th meetings, the correction from resident to owner be made that was suggested by Councilor Devine. And on items 4, 5, and 6, that they show the correct financial year, and that will be 2021, 2022.
Councilmember Smith has made a motion to approve the consent agenda with the amendment of Councilmember Devine's suggestion to change the April 12th, 2022 minutes to reflect owner instead of resident, and to change the FY 2020 to 2021 to 2021, 2022. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Barron has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries. Oh, all opposed? Okay. So the motion carries 4-1. With that being said, we are going to move on to the oath of office administered to the newly elected officers. So thank you, Martin.
Yay, Martin.
Our lovely city secretary, Lori Cassidy, is going to read the oaths to our new council members.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
You have to go take your oath.
Okay. Raise your right hand. In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, I, Mike Smith, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of the City of Blanco, City Council of the state of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God. Thank you. Dita Devine. In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, I, Dita Devine, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of the City of Blanco City Council of the state of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God. Rodney Brakehill. In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, I, Rodney Brakehill, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of the City of Blanco City Council of the State of Texas, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to move on to old business. Item 1, consideration, discussion, and take action on a development agreement between 42 on 32 RV Park LLC and the City of Blanco, Texas. Mr. Escovy.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, residents of Blanco. You have the staff report in front of you, but I'll just kind of shoot from the hip here and kind of just explain because there's a lot of background information. 42 and 32 is an RV park. It's located on 32 east of town, not in the city and not in the ETJ. Decision was made a while back, probably a couple different councils ago, to provide this owner water. And a couple of years ago, they had put that together and started building their park. So one of the things is that when you're outside of the city, you pay a higher rate. And I think if you look at some of the information that was provided to you, you'll see there's a rate code 7, which is what they should have fallen under. I'm going to jump around a little bit. So what had happened was, for the first year or so that they were in operation, their payment was a different code. And even though they have one water tap, they're basically being given water during the winter season, during the off season, about 85, 90,000, maybe more, a little bit more gallons a month. And they were just being charged the regular volumetric rate, but then also only one connection. When in reality, there's actually now 114 connections. I think they started off with the 42, and then they added to that. So fast forwarding to why we're here now, back in December 15th, 2021, the previous city administrator sent a letter to 42 and 32, basically two things: informing them, number one, that there was a belief that they were in distributing water as a public system, that they were actually doing their own system, and the TCEQ reviewed it and determined that they're not operating a public water system. So that's the first item. And then the second item was that because they're distributing water through this one tap, basically 114 connections, that administrator made the decision to go ahead and bill them at the fee, which you've seen, which is $77.25 per service charge, plus the rate code 7 outside the city, which, if you look at it I think at 10,000 gallons, then it starts going up to $13.50, and then after that, it goes up to $15 per 1,000 gallons. So that is in a sense what had happened, and that's why we're here. So what you needed to kind of consider was, this went to Planning Commission, and one of the things that they had requested and that the city administrator had requested was that 42 at 32 RV Park and the city come to a development agreement, so that you as a council would approve or not approve or amend whatever the proposed charge is. So based on talking to the Sybil Jones, who's with 42 and 32, we looked at a different rate, and I'll tell you what the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is very similar to what we did. And before I say that, what I will say is that a lot of these numbers that you're going to look at and think about are arbitrary, in the sense that the reason why we came up with these numbers is that the current charge they're being charged now is about $10,500 a month. They're asking for some relief to that. So this is kind of, and again, this is up to you as council. I'm not assigning, or the Planning Commission is not assigning any value other than what the recommendation is. Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation is to approve a development agreement to charge for the 114 connections at $40 with the current volumetric rate. Further recommendation is no water features or irrigation is to be provided by city water. So that would in a sense take what would have been, I think last month, $10,156 down to $5,850. The reason for still keeping at 114 connections and then assigning a dollar value to that is that if they ever add more, let's say they do 120, 130, whatever it is, that they're charged for all of the value, all of the water that's considered. So having said that, do you have questions of staff? And if there are any real technical questions, I'm going to probably give that to either Zach or Damon with Infomark, but the owners here as well, or the owners representative. Questions of staff?
Yes, sir. I have questions. And I guess understand, and I appreciate all the time and effort that you've put in on this and the customer as well, trying to reach a resolution. I feel like the city and us as council have an obligation to be consistent in our billings, in our billing practices. And my question to you is this proposed billing fee and calculations commensurate and equal to what we're charging our other RV parks outside the city limits?
So the other RV parks right now are based on how many units. So, well, the answer is what we're charging the other RV parks is the 7725 with the volume. Now, there may be some, as in this case, when we were only charging for one tap, there may be a couple of other RV parks that are paying for less connections. So is the amount
Well,
the
I mean,
same?
based off the number of units, I'll clarify. I understand that if there's an RV park over here with 10 units and there's another RV park with 100 units, that one's going to be 10 times as much as the other theoretically. But I want to be fair and equal. I think if we're going to charge a fee, the fee should be equal to all of our customers.
So the answer is whatever you do here, we're looking at a couple other RV parks that are not paying for all the connections. So whatever you do here, we are probably going to look at the other RV parks as well. So I would say that there are probably a couple other RV parks that may be underpaying, and I'm not going to get into that now.
Are there other RV parks paying more than what you're proposing in this?
No.
Okay.
Maybe per rate, but no, there isn't, because
per unit they're paying, this will be equal to the highest paying other RV park outside the city limits that we're building per unit.
So right now per unit, there is another RV park that is paying the 7725. I don't think they're reporting enough units, but no, they are paying at the higher usage rate right now. I mean, that's the answer. So if you're asking, comparing apples to oranges, there's another RV development outside the city in the ETJ that is paying at that higher, at the rate 7. And for everybody's benefit, the rate code 7 is 7725 per connection. And then at 2,000, up to 2,000 gallons, $12, up to 10,000 gallons, $13.50, and then the rest is $15 per 1,000 gallons.
Okay, that's what's proposed on this one, or that is what the other one is paying?
That is currently what the other one is paying. That is currently what 42 and 32 is paying right now.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
Okay. Let me say this again. 42 and 32 and the other RV park are currently paying what I just mentioned, the 7725. What I'm getting at though is there is possibility that 1 or 2 other RV parks are not paying for all of the connections.
Right, okay.
Okay.
All right, then you've answered my question.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to make sure we were uniform across the board with everybody. And
So right now you are, the development agreement would make it not uniform.
Okay. The development agreement would make it not uniform.
Yes, sir.
So to clarify for myself as well,
one park is paying 77.25.
Yes,
We are proposing in this development agreement that they will pay $40.
correct.
It's
Does that answer your
per,
question?
the issue is per connection.
Per
But I'm
connection.
gonna, so what council member, is trying to say though is there's gonna be an argument from this developer and from the other developer that they shouldn't be charged for every connection because it's not a tap. So for example, if you had a home and you had to pay a certain amount per tap, and then there were 10 homes on that block, but a home might use 8 to 10,000 gallons of water per connection, whereas an RV, now we don't know exactly how much, but the TCQ says it's between 1,500 and 2,000 gallons. So a connection's different than a tap, and that's why we're here, is because the former administrator, and I think correctly, started wanting to look at charging more because 114 connections should not be one tap. I mean, I know it is, but it should be charged at a higher rate. Right.
But you're basing it off the number of connections.
Well, yes,
Okay.
we're basing on
If-
connections.
If we, and I'm going off to the left, I'm sorry, but here I go.
And I might grab info Mark here in a minute, so
Okay,
go
that's
ahead.
good. But if we've got an apartment complex and they've got one tap, and then we charge them a meter fee for every apartment, is that not correct?
Zach, you want to help me with this? Because there's two things that are going on with an apartment. There's a master meter,
Right.
and then you could also separately have them separately metered. I know we do. Why don't you explain it a little better than me?
So it's my understanding if they have a master meter,
Yes.
it is charged in this way. So you base it off connections or units, basically.
Units, you basically.
Yeah, so you take that one meter, but then you times it by, say they have 20 units.
Right.
Same thing with the
I understand.
RV
And
park.
that's kind of what we do on the RV park, is we're charging by the connection or
Correct.
by the RV units. Is that not correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Because they don't have an individual meter or tap at each.
Right. Then,
spot.
right, but they do pay that fee for each one of the units.
Mhm.
And so you're proposing to, in the development agreement, reduce it from 77 to 40, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, you answered my questions.
Can you speak to why why we would reduce it to 40 from 77? I guess I'm not understanding why a different park would be paying the full amount and we'd be offering them almost half
So
off.
the other park is probably not paying for all their connections right now. We're
But
gonna have
how-
that, we're gonna have that same problem with that park, when we start charging them for all the connections. And the argument's gonna be, and you can ask the applicant if you want, the argument's gonna be that a tap is not a connection. And when we usually charge people, it's per tap. And so what was decided was to actually charge them per connection.
Okay.
I know what you're asking, and I don't have a good answer other than the former administrator had asked 42 and 32, and they had also asked to have a separate development agreement for relief.
Okay, let me ask you something else.
Sure.
This other park that's operating and possibly isn't paying for all of the connections or taps.
Probably
whatever
for about half of them.
About half of them, and how many does that represent?
That would represent, I believe they have 22, and I believe there's actually 43 spaces.
There's 43 places and they're paying for 22.
So they're paying for about half.
Okay, so they're paying half a different way and we're.
So I'm looking at whatever you decide, whatever you as council decides, we're going to apply to everybody. So I want to be, like Councilmember Smith said, I want to be fair, but this is kind of your test case. Now, if
Right.
you as council say, no, this is the rate, or if you say you want a different rate, or you want to look at different volume, I mean, however you want to do this. The reason why this took a while to get to you, because Mr. Dworshak came to me about 3 months ago, but it took a while for administration and 42 and 32 degree, and it took a while to kind of run the traps with legal, and so now that's why we're here. But whatever you decide now will probably determine what we do in the future, will determine what we do in the future for all RV parks.
Okay, you've answered my questions. What I knew there might have been a disparity in the billings, and I didn't want to approve a lower rate under this one and then wait till next month when we got the other owner coming in saying, well, you know, I want the same deal. But if you're saying we're going to implement the same fee structure with or without a development agreement on all these, right?
Yeah, we would because both this and the other facility are both outside the city. So the way we look at it is it's in the city and those folks pay ad valorem taxes, or is it out in the county and they do not?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do think that's an important differentiation in terms of we may not all entities are created equal, as in if they are within our city limits and they are part of the community, that's a different animal than when they're outside. And I would say too, on the development agreement, 42 on 32 is not even in the ETJ, if I understand correctly.
That
It
is
is
correct.
even outside of the ETJ.
About a quarter mile.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
so those are differences.
Okay, then that raises my next question. The other RV park we're talking about, is that in the ETJ?
It's
or
in
is
the
that-
ETJ.
It's in the ETJ.
Mhm.
Okay.
Ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we enter into the agreement on 4232 RV Park as proposed by our city staff, with the understanding that this will be uniformly applied to other RV parks outside the city limits.
Councilmember Smith has moved to approve the development agreement between 42 on 32 RV Park LLC and the city of Blanco, Texas, with the
Understanding
understanding
the
that
structure will be
these
applied to the other-
structures will be applied to the other outside the city limit RV parks.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question of our council on the agreement, and I've read it several times, but now I'm not sure. On the volumetric charge, does it address the volumetric charge as rigidly applying, or are we dealing here primarily with the connection fees as the basis for that? And the volumetric is simply going to be whatever. In other words, if the volumetric charge changes at some time in the structure, does this development agreement in any way prevent that from happening? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Barron has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. We are going to move on to item 2, discussion, consideration, and possible action on approval of ordinance 2022-00 to be determined, regulating short-term rentals and imposing a related permit fee and penalties, including a fine for non-compliance. Mr. Tuggy.
Yes, Mayor, Council, citizens of Blanco. My name is Tim Tuggy. I'm proud and humbled to be your city attorney. I'm going to talk briefly about first, the authority here that you have and the power that you have. Then I'm going to get into a summary briefing, frequently asked questions that will get into some of the details of this draft ordinance. And then I assume all of you have the May 10th version of this. I'm going to hit the highlights, the major amendments that are in that May 10th draft, and then, of course, be available for your questions, and then turn it over to you.
Mr. Tuggy, I'm going to interrupt just for a minute. Madam Mayor, may I have a point of personal privilege. On the floor of the legislature, it would be called a point of personal privilege, where I'd just like to make a statement about the ordinance as Mr. Tuggy gets started, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to say I'd like to put everybody at rest that has a short-term rental. I think there's been a tremendous amount of misinformation circulated about this. I will say we've worked on this for more than 10 weeks. There have been 3 public hearings. The chamber has never approached me or any other members, to my knowledge, to sit down and go over this. Individuals have approached me, and every individual and short-term rental business owner that approached me was met with, and any of their concerns were dealt with. The draft that was circulating and is opposed, and I feel really bad for the people here talking about things that they're concerned about, aren't even in that draft anymore, not even in the draft that was on the last website. Nobody's short-term rentals are going to be shut down. I'm a short-term rental owner. I've been one since 2016. So nobody's bad-mouthing short-term rental people, or that there's a wonderful place in our community for short-term rentals. What we're trying to do is to strike that balance in the number of the ones that exist and how they exist and are distributed, to make sure we protect the integrity of our neighborhoods, and that there's always an opportunity for neighbors to know what's going on there. And we do not want to become what is happening in so many communities, Fredericksburg being one. They waited too long. Lots and lots and lots of homes were purchased by outside investors, and now these communities are sitting empty all week long, and there's a real shortage of affordable housing. If you have a short-term rental, you're not going to lose it. Mr. Tuggy will explain that all to you. But we're looking at wanting to balance certainly the ability for people to have short-term rentals and provide housing for our tourists. We're also looking at what our community is going to look like in terms of its stability and human capital, so that people can live here and make our neighborhoods and keep our neighborhoods what they are. And we think we've listened to lots and lots, and you'll hear, but I think there was a lot of angst created that was unnecessary, because you're going to see a draft that's very different and has reflected most everything that's come to me anyway, for anybody that reached out to us. That's my point of personal privilege. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. I want to start by just simply stepping back for a minute and reminding council and citizens of the power that you have here. The Texas legislature passed the local government code, and Chapter 211 of the local government code empowers a general law city through its city council to enact zoning ordinances. And this city has in fact enacted zoning ordinances. And what's now happening across the state, frankly across the nation, is a grappling that's going on between the traditional zoning of residential and commercial use that's grafted to some degree or another on top of that residential zoning. So to be clear, you have the power both to enact the zoning ordinances. I'm told by esteemed former mayor that when I was a mere child in 2006, zoning was enacted here in Blanco, and that's on the books as we speak, pursuant to your comprehensive plan. Likewise, you have the power to modify that zoning through special use permits or other mechanisms. So with that, I wanted to be clear that you clearly have this authority granted to you by the people of the state of Texas through its legislature. So with that, let me go into some of the detail at the treetops, if you will, of this ordinance. First, I want to be clear in looking at what is a short-term rental. It's a defined term in this ordinance, and first and foremost, what it is not. It is not, doesn't touch long-term rentals, doesn't affect them, and long-term rentals are anything, as you see in the first bullet there, over 30 days consecutive. In addition, It's not owner occupied, a short-term rental. It's located in the R zones that are listed there. And in this next bullet, you see a number of things that are included in the definition and then excluded. And I can here to tell you that those two line items there have undergone a lot of transformation in the 3 months that I've been working on this ordinance by reason of comment I've received from some of you, from citizens, from city admin, from a variety of sources. So that's the current definition of short-term rentals. With that, let's get into some other questions. Will this short-term rental ordinance put current short-term rentals out of business? No, because this ordinance ensures that vested rights are recognized. This ordinance would go immediately into effect if you adopt it. A 60-day moratorium would occur. During that 60-day period, after notice is published in the local paper and the website, all the current operators of short-term rentals within the city would come in for their permits, provide evidence, and that's defined term, provide evidence of operation as a short-term rental. And they would then, city staff would then be creating a map for the city showing where all these short-term rentals are granted. None of those short-term rentals are going to be going through a planning and zoning, city council special use permit process. Next slide. How will new permits be considered? After this 60-day moratorium period, all new permits can be applied for, and they will be deemed, under the ordinance, they will be deemed an application for special use permit. They will go through staff review pursuant to your ordinances. They will go to P&Z. They will go to city council for approval. Just as you may remember, we just recently had the Sullivan residence use permit taken up here very recently, which in a sense kind of set a precedent for this process. There'll be various considerations at this special use permit stage of the permit application, a variety of factors that are listed, the most crucial of which is that STRs will be no more than, I think, under the current draft, and I'm going to get to this again later, but this slide has been updated under the May 10th draft, which says the application, if granted, will not result in permitting more than 10% of the primary residences in the city block, neighborhood, or similar geographic area as STRs, provided owner-occupied properties are not subject to this limitation. So this 20% limitation you see on the slide is updated on the May 10th draft that you have.
I wouldn't qualify on our block if there's only 5.
There's a variety of operating standards that are applied here. Most of them have to do with giving contact information, having someone available, all the various things we need to have as a city.
But you're not residential, is that residential? No, because that's a zoning.
There's a variety of other considerations, and of course, a life safety inspection requirement for any STR. Can a guest house on the property be permitted? Yes. The answer is yes, and vice versa. The owner could be in the guest house and the STR could be the primary. So that's covered in the ordinance.
People have a house on your lot.
And by the way, that 10% reference that I made earlier only applies to primary residences. So if you have 80% of the accessory detached garages having short-term rentals, that's perfectly permissible. There's no cap on that number. There are other considerations. But that percentage number does not affect use of STR other than the primary residence. Can I sell my short-term rental permit as a business? Here, the ordinance provides that a sale of the permit itself or a transfer of the permit is limited. If you're a vested owner, you enjoy vested rights under the ordinance, you can transfer that permit one time. And then the field is a level playing field among new permit owners and old permit owners at that point.
Right. I can tell you that.
And any new permits after that one transfer, you come back now, new owner comes, they're going back through the special use process for P&Z approval and city approval. And otherwise, no other transfers under the ordinance are permitted unless it's by virtue of family or transfers by will or heirship.
Yeah,
with that, what I'd like to do very briefly is touch on the significant changes. And I know you all have this in front of you, but I think for the public's consumption that are present here tonight, it's important that the major amendments that are in the May 10th draft be stated on the record. First of all, under the special use permit requirements, the distance requirement has been changed to provide the application, if granted, will have no adverse effect on any property within 1,000 feet of the affected property. The May 10th draft deletes the requirement or the prohibition of immediately adjacent short-term rental. I've also read to you.
Excuse me, Tim,
Yes, ma'am.
would you mind referencing what page you're on, just so it's
That's on
faster
page-
for me to keep up? I mean,
That's on page 5.
okay, thank you.
And now let me take you back to page 4.
Thank you.
On page 4, we've added a definition of short-term rental owner occupied. That's an important definition addition because it is used later on in the revised ordinance. So minor change on food service, which is not significant.
We're on page 5 again.
That's on page 5 in the middle under food service, item 1B. And then under item 7 on page 6, under utilities, each short-term rental shall be served by a single water electrical meter unless the STR is bed and breakfast. The STR dwelling unit is a single room within a larger structure, or the STR is owner occupied. That's been added, the owner occupied. Then on page 7, the fee structure has been changed significantly here under the draft before you. And I'll just read this into the record. At the time of submission of the application for a permit, the applicant shall submit the permit application fee described below, portions of which the city may defer and allocate as non-refundable or refundable based upon final action on the permit application as follows. Number 1, on owner-occupied property, $100 per permit application fee. Number 2, for city resident, $300 per permit for the first 2 permit applications for each one. Number 3, for a non-resident, $500 per permit for the first 2 permit applications, each one. And number 4, $1,000 permit in any case for more than 2 permit applications by the same owner. There's a minor change on the bottom of page 7.
On that one.
Yes, sir.
What is the rationale for those amounts?
The rationale is affordability, and as I understand it, the rationale is affordability on the owner-occupied side and disincentive for out-of-town investment, to be candid.
How long, when you apply for a permit, how long is that permit good? Are you?
As long as you own the property.
Okay, so you only do it once if you're,
Right.
you're not doing it yearly, renewing a
Correct.
permit or anything like that.
Correct. There's certain restrictions, as was mentioned earlier in one of the comments, there's a 9-month continuous operation requirement. The way this is drafted right now, if you didn't operate as a short-term rental at least once during a 9-month period, you hold a permit, you don't operate at least once as a short-term rental, then you're subject to revocation of your permit under this draft. That's an arbitrary number. It could be 12 months, it could be 18 months, it could be 6 months. It's just a number that seemed reasonable at the time for the purpose of keeping a permit alive, only that purpose. But obviously that's a policy decision for you to make. And these fees are all policy decisions for you to make. On the bottom of page 7, eliminated the reference to decals and all that. It's just display the permit number at the short-term rental. And then on page 9, M at the top, the language is revised to read, and I'm going to read the current language as well as the revision. No more than 2 short-term rental permits shall be issued for any single residential zoned and platted property lot within the city, unless, and this is the added language, unless such property is owner occupied, provided if the STR short-term rental is a bed and breakfast, one such permit is to be issued. And those are all the changes in the May 10th draft that are different from the May 6th draft that you received in your packet. So with that, that's my presentation. I'm here to answer questions or sit down. Thank you.
I just had a question for the definitions. I noticed that you have a definition for apartment, duplex, but there wasn't one for bed and breakfast, and we have one in the UDC. So I was just going to suggest that maybe we add that definition.
Well, I didn't add it because we're not disturbing the definition itself of bed and breakfast. We are, by the definition of short-term rental, we are saying a bed and breakfast is a short-term rental, but they have a separate regime, a home occupation regime. They have a separate UDC governance structure. So I didn't see that the short-term rental, other than the bare minimum requirements that are set here, especially if they're vested, there really being any impact on the definition of a short-term rental. It does bring bed and breakfast up under the short-term rental concept. But again, they're subject to vested rights if they're in existence now, and they're not subject to vested rights if they're new, like everyone else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
On page 9, it talks about the location that, on general operational requirements, the location of any on-site and off-site parking spaces available for guests. Are there is there anything in here? I've looked through this, but I don't remember seeing anything about the number of parking spaces that need to be provided. Are there any requirements for providing parking?
There's none that are specifically enunciated. However, you've got 2 categories of people that you're going to be dealing with. The vested rights people, you're dealing with public safety issues all the time. If there's a public safety issue, the city administrator and the police department are going to attend to that in any event. Otherwise, they have vested rights or new permit applicants. The question of parking is a consideration of the various factors that planning and zoning and city council will take into account in granting that special use permit. So we're not making it a lockstep deal. We're kind of, looking at it through the review process for a special use permit.
I just wondered because I think the last meeting, we approved a short-term rental where there isn't parking available that I know of. And that concerned me at the time, and still does. We have a rental property and there's no place to park.
And if I understand, Tim, I mean, because every new permit will go through a special use permit process.
Right.
So a lot of the specifics that had been originally in here about occupancy or the number of parking spaces specific, I will say, in the what's felt like 432 short-term rental ordinances from other communities that I read, some of them are very prescriptive. They're very, no more occupancy than 2 people per bedroom plus 1, X number of parking spaces per bedroom. I mean, they really did it. What we chose to do was to say, let's look at it and see what makes sense. Look at where it is, let the neighbors have a chance to express any concerns, and then is there adequate parking, do we think? So it'll be very much like any variance or any other special use permit process that happens, where each case is looked at and people who are involved, as in neighbors as well as owners, et cetera, have an opportunity to address it. And then we would look at those issues per property, per permit.
In fact, at page 4, under the initial criteria for the special use permit, the first item references review of buffer areas, driveways, and parking areas as the special use permit goes through its process. And echoing Councilor Barron's point, in talking to thousands of city attorneys throughout the state that are dealing with this issue, you get this gigantic range of different activity, from highly prescriptive to basically register it and we'll see you later. We don't care. And I think the general observation is that where you fall on that range is how many complaints the neighbors are making. So having a robust, you need to grant the vested rights, they are what they are, but having a robust and fair review process that's not prescriptive down to the T, I think is a good middle ground. But obviously your decision as policymakers. So any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Maybe direct me. Mrs. Arnold, thank you. Mrs. Arnold brought up I think it was that we were talking about the 9-month void, and then you lose your permit. Is that correct?
Right. The way this is drafted right now, if you don't have continuous, if you basically go 9 months without acting like a short-term rental, actively renting the property,
right,
then you risk the possibility of the permit being yanked.
Could you help me out? I'm not seeing it here. I'm overlooking it. Could you direct me to it?
I thought we took it out. Maybe we didn't. Oh, it's on page 9. Any short-term rental permit shall terminate and be considered abandoned.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
if there's evidence of no transient lodging rental activity based in part on any tax reports or a period of 9 consecutive months, the burden's on the property owner to prove the property had been in continuous use as an STR. And maybe it's not a matter of continuous use. It sounds like we're looking at that it was utilized at some point in that period as an STR. And if 9 months is not enough, we make it 12 months, or if it's going to need to be taken off the market for a reason, then we can put something that says the owner can notify the city of some
Well,
break in
or you
something.
could say, subject to reasonable discretion of the city administrator on an exceptional basis. In the circumstances Ms. Arnold just described, I can see, that's an extraordinary situation where some discretion might be appropriate, or actually is appropriate.
Sure. So we could amend that to allow for judgment and the condition for removing it for a period of time.
Thank you for finding that. I couldn't find it. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I would like to move that we accept the May 9th, what's today? So, thank you. The May 10th draft of the short-term rental ordinance with a provision amended to, on page 9N, that will address flexibility for no use during a 9-month period. We'll figure that out, but we'll address that in there somehow. Otherwise, I move we adopt.
Councilmember Barron has moved to adopt the proposed ordinance 2022-00XX with the draft from the May 10th draft version, with a provision to address the flexibility of the 9-month consecutive months period. Is there a second?
Yeah, you're proposing to delete that item?
To add something that would either make it longer or allow discretion. The attorney will fix that for us.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Councilmember Devine has seconded. Further discussion?
I'd like to speak a little bit to what we tried to do in this draft. And because a lot of the comments, again, I don't think people had the updated version. One of the things that was most important to me was to make sure that owner-occupied properties have preferential treatment in the city, and owners who live in the city have preferential treatment. So a property that is your guest house or your garage or whatever, you are on the lowest tier of fee, and many of the things that apply to someone who is an investor from out of town do not apply to you. So we've tried in every way we could to protect and to encourage people who are trying to make a little extra money by renting out their guest house or their garage or their whatever. We want to encourage that, and we want to support that, and we want to make that accessible for those owners, and especially owners who live in the city. What we want to discourage, and I think it's the conversation cities are having all over the country, is how do you balance this? I mean, I am a short-term rental owner for 7 years, so I'm not anti-short-term rental, I'm not anti-business, but I know that in the French Quarter now, they have no short-term rentals in the French Quarter. They made it illegal because all of those homes had been bought up. And then as many people have made the point, you don't have neighbors. What you have are empty buildings during the week and strangers, tourists, whatever. I don't think that in general, I think it's a pretty self-regulated business. You get one bad review, people are going to think twice before they come. You get 3 and you're out of business. And that goes both ways, guests and owners. It regulates pretty well in those ways, I think. But the other issue, the issue of people wanting to live in neighborhoods where they have neighbors, is a real issue. And so we've done the best we could to really protect owner occupants, people who are renting out part of their home or their guest house, to protect you and make that accessible for you, while really discouraging I'm not ashamed to say, actively discouraging outside investors coming in and buying up the properties that are available that could be homes for the people who cannot afford to live in our community, whether that's teachers, the people who serve your food, entry-level police officers. There's no housing. So we want to find that balance, and we did the best we could. I'd like to see this passed tonight, and if we need to make some adjustments, we can always go back and do that. We can take we've got this 60-day moratorium on any new permits where we can really kind of evaluate maybe there's some overreach in here. Maybe we didn't go far enough in some ways, but we really tried to balance the neighbors, the community concerns with businesses that are already operating as short-term rentals too. So that's what I have to say about it.
I have other comments. So, again, I am in favor of a short-term rental agreement and, or ordinance, I'm sorry. And I do think there needs to be some regulations on them. And I appreciate everybody's work that has worked on this, but the final draft of this didn't come out till today. And I don't know if the citizens had access to it. And I think a moratorium would be a better suited solution. I don't want to keep kicking this can down the road. I do not want to keep kicking this can down the road, but in the new one, it has changed enough that I have some other questions and comments that I would like to have addressed. And I don't think this is really the format for it. I think we need to have a moratorium, and if this ordinance doesn't pass, I'll make a motion.
All in favor?
All in favor?
All opposed? The motion carries 3-2. Moving on to new business. Item 1, consideration, discussion, and take action on approval of special use permit and rezoning from R5 to C1 at 1917 Main Street.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, residents of Blanco. This is an application, 1917 Main Street, basically on 281. I'm going to give a little bit of background, explain some of the reasonings, and then go into the planning and the zoning's recommendation to you. So Mr. Brewer is an applicant has 4.99 acre tract of land. It's on the west side of 281, more specifically south of the Buggy Barn Museum, and then north some mobile homes. There's the area there is vacant land, and it's currently zoned as R5. So what Mr. Brewer would like to do, what he was asking for, was to do basically two things, and I'm going to go backwards here a little bit. He met with Planning Commission a couple months ago, maybe a month and a half ago, and had asked if he were to do self-storage or mini storage, how would that work? And they gave him some suggestions, and then when he met with staff, the recommendation from the staff was to go ahead and request, if you wanted to do that in the R5 zone, is to do a rezone to C1 and do what we call a special use permit to allow for the mini storage in C1. So the practical purposes for the reason why originally staff looked at recommending approval was, if you look at that area, it's just raw acreage. It hasn't developed yet, and that's what happens as things start to develop. So, and if you look at the area around it, it is somewhat commercial, and that was the reasoning for that. The other thing is to let you know is that there's available water on 281, but it really is not available sewer. So everything in that area and then north of there will have, for the most part, septic. Will not have city services, at least for sewer. So what Mr. Brewer wanted to do was he wanted to have something that didn't need a lot of water or sewer. So going through this information, then I'm going to kind of switch over to the planning and zoning, what their recommendation was, and then I'll explain why, and then I'll restate it. So their recommendation was they recommend disapproval of the SCP of the zone change. So let's talk a little bit about why they did that and where we're at with the zoning. So about a year ago or so, we went through and looked at our zoning, looked at the zoning map. Probably spent, I wasn't here, probably spent 18 months looking at the zoning map. And as you know, most cities are very, very, very protective of their zones. And there's, there were a lot of meetings, there were a lot of public hearings on specifically that. So let's talk about what he's zoned. He's currently zoned as R5. An R5 zone would allow things like office, allow things such as retail. It would also allow restaurants that sold less than 51% or 49% or less in alcohol. So if your sales were 51% food or other products and not alcohol, it's allowed. With an R5, you could get an SUP, a special use permit, to allow for places that provided music, with bars, did those sorts of things. So cities that have zoning generally would rather you have an SUP, a special use permit, or a conditional use permit in some places, rather than a complete zone change, because most communities are very protective of their zone, and that's a fact. Most cities are. So one of the other things that planning and zoning, when they discussed it, was they had talked to some of the neighbors, and the feeling from planning and zoning and from the neighbors is that what they would like is something more commercial in nature. So while staff looked at some more practical things, planning and zoning really looked at the zoning in the area and the specific neighborhood uses. And so that is why they recommended disapproval of the SCPs and the zone change, mainly for the zone change. And I'll respect what planning and zoning came up with. So I'll state the recommendation again. Recommendation is planning and zoning recommend disapproval of the SCP and zone change. Questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. The applicant mentioned that before it was R5, it was commercial. What was the zoning before the recent map rewrite?
I believe it was a C1.
It was.
I believe a couple of years ago was C1, and then through the process, and my understanding, and I wasn't here, my understanding is that when they did the zone, they looked at the zoning map, they really looked at the existing uses. So I do believe it was C1, but it did get, there was plenty of notification. And the reason for the R5 is that, just so you know, R5 is residential and commercial combined. It used to be the old mixed use. So I do believe it was C1, but it isn't now.
And the C1 doesn't allow him to do what he wants without a special use permit.
Correct. He would still need a special use permit, but there's a bigger jump between having a zone change and an SUP than just an SUP. And you'll see that an SUP it's basically allowed. It's just a special use.
Thank you.
So, right.
I can see the advantages of having just kind of a business there where it doesn't take a lot of water, and there won't be a lot of traffic going in and out and that sort of thing. But we do have right there a very unique business, if you will, in the Buggy Barn Museum and the Pine Moor Studios. It's kind of neat to be able to say you're making movies in your town, and I wish that we could, and also it's right on the entrance to the city. I kind of hate to see more storage units go in, as we come into towns all over the country now. And not that they're bad, and many of them can be attractive, but I sure would like to see something next to that studio and that museum that might further enhance that area rather than this kind of a business. Not that it's, no, you know, I don't want to thumbs down, but at the same time, I wish we had, that there could put something else next to that.
It's a practical request, but if you look at the zoning and you look at what the planning commission and zoning commission is trying to say, they have a valid point with the zoning. I mean, this is a tough one.
And I'm sorry, my understanding is that these units will be placed not right on 281, but further back. Is that correct, or is that specified?
That's my understanding.
I can't really see that from the diagrams here.
It's on there.
There should be another diagram in there. I believe it's set back.
They have these, but
Yeah.
I don't know where they're going to be placed.
Right.
It is one of the things. It is an area that it would be nice for it to get cleaned up, and I think it used to be an old RV park. It'd be nice to have that area cleaned up. But yeah, I believe it's set back. So, I mean, either way, whatever the council decides, you have flexibility either way to approve it or not to approve it.
And did I understand the applicant correctly that there is no wastewater to this property? But is that correct?
So let me speak to the city's portion of it, and then Mr. Brewer can answer that. But right now, there's no readily available wastewater in that area. So I believe there's a wastewater line on the other side of 281, but it's not readily accessible. Is that correct, Zach? Because that's when I looked at the maps, it looks like it would probably cost quite a bit to get that sewer. Now, he probably has septic, and most of those properties have septic there, but
Okay.
we would not be able to serve them with sewer very easily.
And the property that's to the other side where Milam and Green is, do they have wastewater service there? They do not, so they're using septic there as well. Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Milam and Green?
Milam and Green, yeah, yeah.
Or just what?
When the site was developed, originally by Mr. Reynolds, he put in two 1,000.
You speak into the mic.
When Mr. Reynolds built the RV park, it wasn't in the city limits. But what he did is he put it in under TNRCC rules and regulation, and so I have plenty of sewage capacity because I've got two 1,000-gallon tanks that are in series with one another. So I don't need the wastewater, to run the what I need for the mini storages, because it's just storage. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to put on-site people there to live in the residence that I remodeled to be 24/7. There to be someone there. So I'm just trying to make it a whole lot nicer, for citizens of Blanco. I'll have to repipe and refence. There'll be a gated, coded easement, or getting in and out of the property. And if you look at most storage places now, they're well maintained, they're kept clean, and I've got rules and regulations that I have to go by for owning an RV. For a storage building. And so what I'm trying to do is just focus on just getting it so that I can get it back into the C1, so that I can develop something on it. I don't want another RV park there. I want something that's nicer than that. So I've tried to this is the third time I've been in front of the city to try to make something nicer than what's there. So I certainly do appreciate it. Thank you.
Warren, can I ask one more item of you? Again, with the wastewater, if whether it's the applicant or somebody in the future, if he sold the property and they want to do something that would require wastewater, would the onus of that be on the city or the applicant and the developer in that case? And what does the future look like for that?
So the future looks like, okay, so if we go backwards, generally, the applicant, the developer has to bring that sewer to the area. However, we'll also have to look at the annexation plan at the time and what the requirements were. But from the general statement, whoever develops it in the future will have to, at their cost, bring it in.
Thank you.
You bet. I believe they're septic, correct? Yes, septic, sir.
Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we support the decision of our Planning and Zoning Commission and recommend the denial of the special use permit and the rezone.
Councilmember Smith has moved to deny the special use permit from rezoning from R5 to C1 at 1917 Main Street as suggested from our Planning and Zoning Commission. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Thurkel has seconded. Further discussion?
I want to understand, because we're looking at two things, and I know that what the planning and zoning, but I feel like we're looking at two different things, and it confuses me a little bit. One is, does the rezone make sense? Does it make sense to rezone from R5 to commercial on that particular piece of property? Given where it is set back from the main highway, I don't know. And then the second thing, I think at the planning and zoning, they felt like it was that double change, that if you were going to go to if you were going to go to commercial, then it should be something that would have been allowed under commercial in the first place. Otherwise, why was it not rezoned industrial where it could be used? So I'm trying to understand whether I just maybe need a little more understanding of whether the rezone would make sense without the special use permit request, or is that what complicated things?
So I think what you have to do is you have to look at what the specific request is, okay? So I guess we usually work backwards. Instead of saying, does a rezone make sense? We look at why you have to rezone it. So the first thing that the planning commission chair will do, and she does a really good job, is she'll say, is this the lowest use? Is that, so for example, if they wanted to have a restaurant there, a restaurant that had alcohol, instead of doing a zone change, she would say, well, I would just rather approve an SUP because they're going to go for the lowest use. So it's hard to answer your question, because what Mr. Brewer wants to do is mini storage. If there was some other commercial use that wasn't allowed as an R5 SUP, then it might make sense to do that. But without the specific example, it would be hard to say that. So, maybe if you wanted to do an amusement park and that wasn't allowed as an SUP in the R5, then maybe you could say, okay, yes, we could do a small amusement park or an arcade or mini golf. And I think that would be something that you could probably just do as a C1. So it's hard to answer your question because we usually look at the specific use first. So that was the recommendation of the planning and zoning was to deny it because they didn't like that specific use and they didn't like the two steps that would be required to do that. That's their opinion.
Gotcha. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion was to follow the Planning and Zoning Commission's guide.
To deny
which was
the
deny.
rezone and the SUP.
it was a two-part request, one for a special use permit and one to change from R5 to C1. And it would be denial on both of those.
All in favor? All opposed? The motion does not pass. Does not pass. 3-2 does not pass. So we are going to move on to item 2, consideration.
Point of comment, Mayor, that didn't pass, then there isn't a motion. So does someone want to make a new motion then?
Would somebody like to make a new motion?
I mean, okay, so if it didn't pass, which means you did not deny his application. So the question is, does someone want to make a motion to approve the zone change and the SUP at this point? Or do you want to table it? I mean, that's your choice at this point.
Or in layman's terms, the applicant's still in the game here. Yeah.
Yeah, the applicant's still in the game because the planning and zoning made a recommendation to deny. That didn't pass. So what do you want staff to do at this point?
Is there another motion, or do we would like to table this?
I'll try again. I mean, you know, can I run it again, Warren? And is it a plea with it at this point? Or is that futile? Is that allowed?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Okay. Can I make a similar motion again? And see if I can get more support.
You can do whatever you like, sir.
All right, we're gonna try this again. All right. This was highly opposed in planning and zoning. I attended the planning and zoning meeting and wanted to learn more about what was going on. From what I understood, they didn't feel like this was in the best interest of our city. If you come into town on the major, I mean, you're either coming or leaving and you're gonna see this. Either, unless you're taking 165, that's it. And the idea of many storage buildings was less than palatable to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And for that reason, they denied the change. It needs both C1 and a special use permit. That's the same thing as industrial. And they didn't feel like an industrial type application or something that has to come as you come into the city. They'd rather you see a restaurant or some other form of retail business than storage units. And I'm not knocking storage units, but this is the gateway to our city. And for that reason, I want to make another motion that we deny this request based off the comments and the recommendation from Planning and Zoning.
Councilmember Smith has moved to deny this request based on the public input and the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Is there a second?
I will again second that.
Councilmember Thrakill has seconded. Further discussion?
Now, this is a motion.
Deny. To deny the application, yes.
All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 2, consideration, discussion, and take action on approval of special use permit to allow multifamily in R5 for the 1 acre site at 618 Live Oak.
Thank you, Mayor, council, and residents. And I think in between the time when the application came in and now, the applicant is now the owner. So Mr. Mike Arnold's requesting a special use permit to do a multifamily project on a 1 acre site at 618 Live Oak. That project used to be the old nursing home. It does have the adequate amount of parking. So the process was that Mr. Arnold had had been doing some construction already and has been going through the process when it was determined later on by Planning Commission and by the city administrator that he actually needed to go through the process and actually get the SUP because it is in the R5 zone. R5, as we talked about just earlier about zoning, R5 does allow apartment complex or multifamily as a special use permit. So this is a pretty small ask in that case. They'll still have to follow all the rules of multifamily and make sure they have the correct parking, make sure they have the correct drainage, all those sort of things. But Planning and Zoning recommends the City Council approval of the SUP to allow multifamily in the R5 for the 1 acre site at 618 Live Oak. Questions of staff?
Why does it, I'm just confused why it says R.L. Toms instead of the Arnolds. I see. Okay, great, thank you.
So I would like to move that we grant the special use permit in R5. I'm looking for the address. Tell me where my motion is coming here. Thank you. At 618 Live Oak.
Councilmember Barron has moved to approve the special use permit to allow the multifamily in the R5 zone at 1618 Live Oak. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Smith has seconded. Discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. We're going to move on to item 3, consideration, discussion, and take action on approval of building setback at 1725 South US Highway 281.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, residents of Blanco. Second Echo LLC has built an art studio or created an art studio in the area that used to be a restaurant. It's located on 281, and in the front area or off to the side, they're requesting a 10-foot encroachment on the side setback. Normally, it's a 20-foot side setback, and they will be putting in a secondary building. At a future time, it'll have to be determined if that building's allowed in that zone, but at this time, all they're requesting is for the variance for the side setback. As I'll explain on the variance, we tend to look at variances as having two things, whether it's a big ask, whether it's a big variance from the rules. In this case, it isn't. And then we also look at whether there's an actual hardship, which there really isn't. If the studio's already there, it's just the additional accessory building that they want to put in there. So they just couldn't put the building, or they may lose some parking spaces. So when you look at the analysis, the 10-foot encroachment's not a big deal, but there's not really anything to support the hardship. Having said that, Planning and Zoning recommends approval of the requested variance. Questions of staff?
I just want to be clear where we are, as you said, only allowing that the structure that goes in there can have an additional 10 feet.
Yes, ma'am.
But whatever goes in there is going to have to go through the code and the process and comply with everything that it would need to comply with otherwise.
Correct. So after it goes through this process, they'll submit a site plan, they'll submit a building plan for this. If Bureau Veritas, who's our current reviewer, says, no, this is not allowed, or this is not the type of product that's allowed, it will be denied.
Okay.
But right now, we're just talking about the variance.
Thank you.
In the recommendations from the chair that we got from the Planning and Zoning chair, she mentioned the fence height of 6 feet might need to change to 8 feet. Can you elaborate more on that?
I think they were recommending that they would like to see an 8-foot fence, which is allowed, which would give a little bit more privacy for the surrounding areas. You can include that or not include that in your approval or not approval.
I would love to speak to that at the appropriate time.
It might be noteworthy, the person, the Arnolds bought the property next door that shares the fence line with them, and they apparently approve of this. From
They do.
what I gathered at P&Z.
Right.
They're not here to verify that now, but
They did.
They did speak in support of it.
so there's that.
Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the variance request to a 10-foot setback instead of a 20-foot setback at 1725 South US Highway 281.
Councilmember Smith has moved to approve the variance from a 20-foot to a 10-foot side yard setback at the property 1725 South US Highway 281. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Barron has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 4, consideration, discussion, and take action on approval of variance to allow for 10-foot fencing around the tennis courts at the Blanco High School.
Thank you, Mayor. Blanco ISD is asking for a variance. They've already gotten the plans approved for the tennis courts. They're asking for a variance to allow for a 10-foot fence instead of an 8-foot, which is what is allowed in the UDC. As you know, most tennis courts, if anyone plays tennis, if you only have an 8-foot fence, you're having balls going over, and that's from a practical standpoint, a safety standpoint. This is pretty easy to ask. You really do need a 10-foot. I haven't played in a place that's only an 8-foot fence. So having said that, Planning Commission did recommend approval of the 10-foot fence to City Council for a tennis court located at the high school. Questions to staff?
Is there a motion?
The variance allowed
Councilmember McCullen has moved to approve the 10-foot fencing around the high school tennis courts. Is there a second?
I will second.
Councilmember Devine has seconded. Any further discussion?
They've seen me play tennis. That's why they have it.
All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. We are going to move on to item 5, discussion and take action on approval of a mayor pro tem for the term May 2022 through May 2024. Is there a motion? We will be needing somebody. Somebody's gonna need to step up.
If it's a matter of just being around a lot for like check signing and that sort of thing, I'm here all the time. So if it's just who's going to be here to sign the checks?
Or provide if Rachel's out.
Well, yes, but she's not going to be out. She's young, she's healthy, she's
Anybody like to turn that into a motion?
I'll nominate Connie. So
Councilmember Smith has nominated Councilmember Barron. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Councilmember Devine has seconded. Any further discussion?
No, ma'am.
All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. Item 6, consideration, discussion, and take action on approval of amendment to Resolution 2021 R009, designating persons authorized to sign on the city's depository accounts as the official signatories of the city of Blanco, which since we just elected Mayor Pro Tem Barron, I would recommend that we add her as well.
So you need a motion?
I need a motion.
Okay, and this will be, I recommend amendment to resolution 2021-009, and we add Counselor Barron.
Okay, Councilmember Smith has moved to approve the amendment to resolution 2021 R009 to add Mayor Pro Tem Barron to the city's depository accounts. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Devine has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. Going to move on to item 7, consideration and discussion only on approval of water quality protection ordinance. And I just want to reiterate, this is just a discussion item and there will be no action taken.
You want to bring it? Oh, this is, oh, wow, thank you. And for you, this was actually brought to my attention by our city attorney that this was something that municipalities had the authority to do under the water code. And what it allows, it's a water quality protection ordinance. And what makes it so significant for us is that it does apply to developments in our ETJ. So as developments are coming close to us, some of the authority that we lose in our ability to apply certain aspects of our UDC, this gives us some stronger, a little more power, a little more leverage, a little more authority over some of those components. This particular ordinance, to my knowledge, has been passed by Hayes County, by the city of Wood Creek, by the city of Wimberley. It may be too much for us. I've asked our city attorney, our city engineer to sort of take a look at it, as well as our capital improvement asset management committee that has engineers on it. If there's any part of it that doesn't seem to make sense or doesn't fit with Blanco, then it'll be amended, but I wanted it to be out there for people to see, to begin to evaluate, to understand we're looking at it. It deals with drainage, runoff, impervious cover. If you're building over things that are environmentally sensitive, making sure that that drainage and runoff doesn't go into creek beds and our river. So that's the goal of it. And I encourage you all to fall asleep reading it. Kim, would you like to add anything, or Lauren?
I'd like to add just a little bit. My background's more from the drainage standpoint, less from the water, as you know. And I think it's really important as we start moving towards this time, and we're starting to look at quality of life ordinances, that we do start focusing on drainage as well. I mean, we've been talking a lot about water and the wastewater here, but I've been looking at our drainage ordinance, and it does need some tweaking, and this will be a good opportunity to kind of get that catch-all and start looking at all those things. And again, this is more for a better quality of life for all residents and not necessarily clamping down on people, but we're just going to try to look at that. But I do agree with the council member that there's, Mayor Pro Tem now, that there's a lot, it's a pretty voluminous, and I'd rather just kind of whittle it down a little bit before we see it again.
I want to just add, as a reminder where this started, particularly for a new member of council. You may recall that you looked at a site plan for a MUD many months ago, which had basically 45-foot sight lines, lot lines. And I think the reaction was generally very negative. Now, that was not formal action, et cetera, et cetera. What that brought up specifically was there's a statutory limitation that you face in regulating density, lot density in your ETJ. Generally, you just can't do that. There's a lot of case law, court decisions on that. One of the ways that is available to you is by regulation of water use, water quality, and so forth and so on. So I do think Warren is right that this regulation will need to be vetted and probably whittled down a bit, because administratively, I think you'd almost have to hire enough half-time staff if you had a significant amount of projects going on in your ETJ, but you got to start somewhere, so.
Happy reading.
Yeah, as I read through this, I thought, boy, if all of our city ordinances are 28 pages of single space, how do you cope with that?
What else are you gonna do with your spare time, council member?
And yet, it's good stuff, but boy, there's got to be a better way to to do this.
Is there any more discussion? Okay, well, we are going into the executive session. Item 1, Texas Government Code, Section 551071, Section 105, Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct, and 551072, to wit, discussion with legal counsel to obtain legal advice related to possible reclaimed water contract between